The clock was ticking, and from the podium in Jerusalem came words that would shake a continent. Benjamin Netanyahu's ultimatum was blunt and merciless. Ibrahim Traoré, the 34-year-old soldier president of Burkina Faso, had only 48 hours to leave power, to surrender, or to face consequences so heavy the world dared not name them aloud. For some it sounded like a distant political spat. For Africa, it was thunder, echoing across decades of silenced leaders and shattered dreams. To understand the weight of this moment, one must remember the names written in blood across Africa's soil. Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, voices that rose too boldly, only to be silenced by the invisible hand of global powers. Netanyahu's ultimatum placed Traoré squarely in that tragic line. But was this young captain destined to fall like the others, or to break the cycle and write a new chapter? Ibrahim Traoré's rise was itself a story carved from dust and defiance. Not born in privilege, not polished in elite schools of the West, he rose through the ranks as a soldier, shaped by hardship, witnessing firsthand how his people suffered, while foreign powers bled his country dry. When he spoke, he carried the grit of a battlefield commander and the sincerity of a son of the soil. He promised no more begging bowls, no more hidden chains disguised as foreign aid, no more surrender of dignity. It was a voice raw and unfiltered, one that carried across Africa like a spark in dry grass. To the youth, he was proof that courage still lived. To the elders, he was a memory of Sankara reborn. But to those who held the puppet strings of global order, he was a problem that needed to be solved, quickly. Netanyahu's 48-hour warning was no simple threat. It was psychological warfare, a countdown meant to weaken the will before the first bullet was fired. In Ouagadougou, the capital, news spread like wildfire. Radios crackled, televisions blared, and whispers of dread circled marketplaces. Some closed their shops early, fearing chaos. Families huddled together, asking what would happen when the clock struck zero. Yet alongside the fear, something else began to rise: defiance. Students painted murals of Traoré on walls overnight, fists raised against the deadline. Women in villages and cities alike gathered in courtyards, praying aloud with voices mixing faith and fire. Soldiers stood straighter at checkpoints, watching not just as guards, but as guardians of a moment bigger than themselves. The ultimatum had not crushed the people, it had ignited them. Outside Burkina Faso, the continent's reaction was fractured. In some capitals, leaders whispered behind closed doors, shaken by what they saw. Some feared the consequences of defying such power. They worried of sanctions, isolation, or worse, foreign soldiers once again marching through African soil under the false banner of peacekeeping. Others felt envy, shame, and admiration. For in Traoré they saw what they themselves once wanted to be: unbending, unafraid, unowned, but had long abandoned for the comfort of compromise. In Western cities, think tanks scrambled, analysts drew maps of West Africa, calculating alliances, predicting what might follow. Netanyahu's ultimatum had not just cornered Traoré, it had disrupted the entire board. As the first 24 hours passed, tension thickened like storm clouds. The streets of Ouagadougou filled with chants and songs, not of fear, but of resistance. Thousands lit candles in the central square, their flickering flames rising into the dark sky like stars of defiance. The songs they sang were the same ones whispered during Sankara's revolution decades before. Songs of freedom, dignity, and a future owned by Africans themselves. Foreign media, however, told a different tale. Headlines branded Traoré reckless, unstable, dangerous. Commentators painted him as a hot-headed soldier dragging his nation toward ruin. But behind those headlines lay fear, the fear that if Traoré succeeded, others would follow, that if Burkina Faso could defy, then Mali, Niger, Guinea, and perhaps the whole continent could one day stand in unison. By the 36th hour, whispers of betrayal began to surface. Rumors spread that generals had been approached with bribes, offered wealth and safety if they turned against their leader. Envoys whispered promises of exile in luxury, of a quiet life abroad, if only Traoré would step down without a fight. But each morning, Traoré appeared before his people, calm, firm, and unbroken. He refused exile, He refused surrender. He refused silence. His defiance gave his people courage. Then came the 47th hour. The air in Ouagadougou was electric, heavy with suspense. Streets overflowed with bodies. Children perched on their parents' shoulders. Old men and women gripped candles with trembling hands. Rumors swirled faster than the wind. Jets on standby. Sanctions already drafted. Foreign troops moving in the shadows. Yet still the people stood. As the final minutes approached, cameras turned to the presidential palace. Traoré stood on his balcony, silent but resolute, as thousands below roared his name. With each second closer to midnight, the ultimatum's power slipped away. And then, the clock struck 12. The 48th hour ended. Nothing happened. No planes took off. No bombs fell. No soldiers stormed the gates. The ultimatum expired into silence, and in that silence was victory. Traoré had not surrendered. He had not fled. He had stood his ground, and by standing, he had exposed the bluff. For the first time in years, an African leader had defied the ticking clock and survived the countdown. At dawn, the streets of Ouagadougou erupted in celebration. Drums pounded, feet stomped, songs filled the air. Children painted their faces. Men and women danced in unison, and elders lifted their hands to the sky in thanks. Across Africa, the ripples spread. In Lagos, tens of thousands marched. In Kinshasa, murals appeared of Traoré alongside Lumumba. In Johannesburg, students gathered outside embassies, chanting his name. What had begun as an ultimatum to one man had ignited a continental movement. Newspapers in Europe and America scrambled to explain. How could a poor, landlocked nation stare down such a powerful threat and win? Analysts argued about strategy, geopolitics, and shifting alliances. But the truth was simpler. The spirit of a people had outweighed the threat of power. Traoré had proven that courage was a weapon as mighty as any army. And yet the story is not finished. Hidden chains still rattle. Foreign powers still scheme. The fight for true African independence is not over. It has only begun. The ultimatum failed, but others will follow. And when they come, the question will not just be about Burkina Faso. It will be about all of us. So I ask you, watching this now, if the fate of your people rested on your shoulders, what would you choose? Would you kneel before power, or would you stand with courage, knowing the cost but also knowing the reward of freedom? Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Because this story belongs not only to Traoré, not only to Burkina Faso, but to every African, every human being who refuses to be silenced. The 48 hours are over, but the struggle for dignity has only just begun. And in the silence of that 48th hour, a new chapter of Africa's history was written, one of defiance, one of courage, one of hope.